I'm leaving on a jet plane. I don't know when I'll be back again. Leaving on a jet plane. That was a little John Denver. And I don't know how to break this to you, but the A's are going to Las Vegas. The latest narrative on the Vegas move and everything that is wrong with it. Today on Locked On A's.
You are Locked On A's, your daily Oakland A's podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On A's, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I am your host, Booney. That's right, one name. Episodes will drop Monday through Friday at 6 a.m. That's Oakland time, Vegas time, and yes, Sacramento time. Whether you are on your way to work, driving back from work, or listening casually during the day. Thank you for making Locked On A's your first listen of the day. I'm from the Bay Area, and I've been a diehard A's fan since 1981. I'm here to bring you a real fan's take, covering everything from Oakland to Sacramento to Las Vegas. This is the place for A's fans to get the latest game breakdowns, team news, and more. This is where the passion of the fans take center stage. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. And please hit that subscribe button wherever you are following the show. Today's episode is brought to you in part by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. A lot of chit chat, lots, has been going on with the A's relocation in the last few days, due mainly to two events. One, the Las Vegas Stadium Board is meeting today, in which they will consider approving non-relocation development and lease agreements with the A's. Secondly, as we have all heard by now, the stadium cost is up to $1.75 billion from the previous estimate of $1.5 billion. This really should come at no surprise to anyone and is honestly not unusual, as major league teams will, add additional amenities such as luxury seats or added suites. They may change a design of certain parts of the park. I mean, I expected to even go higher, maybe closer to the 2 billion mark when it's all said and done. My original take on this subject is that I did not believe the A's were going to Vegas. And my main reason for that take was there was no mentioning of where the financing was coming from. In the news that Fisher was attempting to sell a $500 million stake of the team for 25% ownership, which was a bold feat to say the least. Taking all this into account, I did not believe John Fisher would be willing to liquidate any of his other holdings, whether it would be real estate or stock, to pay for the stadium, considering that those types of liquidations come at a very hefty cost. Now, the very next day, new news came out where John Fisher secured financing from US Bank and Goldman Sachs. On top of that, Fisher presented a letter that his family will invest in the stadium $1 billion. At that point, I completely changed my take and knew that this stadium in Las Vegas will get done. Done deal. I was certain of it. And that has not changed whatsoever. And let me break down the misinformation we are hearing out there today. My first of two original concerns was Fisher liquidating any of his holdings to pay for this project. I was right, and that is the sole reason the whole family got involved. The second concern was no financing being mentioned. Both those concerns I had were addressed less than 24 hours later after my original take. Before I came to the bright lights and fame of being an A's podcaster on the Locked On network, I worked for banks and involved in the lending aspect of it. More on the residential side, but yes, partnerships on the commercial side often coincided with common clients. I did this for over 20 years and did it at somewhat of a high level where I had the opportunity to work with individuals in the ballpark as guys like John Fisher. I worked briefly with US Bank as well. And each banking institution you work with caters to their high net worth clients in different ways. US Bank was one of the better ones. They would bend over backwards for an individual that had a great relationship with them. So, in other words, I have a good grasp of what is going on with regard to the financing. There is a lot of chatter comparing a purchase of a commercial building and or construction loan for a commercial building and a residential loan. Two different animals. I am not going to get into the boring details of a construction loan and a loan on a property where it is already built. In the simplest terms, a construction loan is done in stages, where a loan on an existing dwelling is not. When an individual is financing something from 1 to 4 units, which could be a condo, single family residence, or anything that goes up to 4 units, right? A duplex, threeplex, fourplex, etc. A lender wants to know the qualifications of the individual. What is your credit score? What is your income? How much debt do you have? What's the property worth? How much money and what kind of money do you have in the bank? They plug all that into a formula, and based on all that information, you either fall in the box and get approved, or you don't fall in the box and get denied. There's a bit more to it, but not a whole lot. It really comes down to that. Regarding a commercial loan, and a stadium would fall under that definition, the lender strictly cares about the actual property itself, not the individual. And it cares about the income that property may produce in order to qualify. 1 to 4 units, they care about the individual. Anything over 4 units, they care about the property. How do you figure income on something that hasn't even begun construction? Great question. What has been lost in between the lines is the independent appraisals that have been done. Those appraisals are, first of all, so darn detailed. And if I had to guess, the appraisals that have been done on the site have probably cost in the ballpark of around 50 grand. And that's maybe on the conservative side. The appraisal takes comps, just like it would when you are refinancing your home or selling your home. It's going to take comps from the local neighborhood and to see what has sold that's a similar size, same amount of bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage, etc. Now, what it does on the commercial side is it would take a similar type of property, right? Let's say stadiums, Allegiant Stadium, I'm sure it took. What is that stadium producing regarding income? And in taking Allegiant Stadium, where the Raiders play, they would adjust the numbers based on the size of Allegiant Stadium and the proposed size of the new stadium going up. On top of that, they will look at all of Fisher's commercial holdings and put that into the equation as well. Regarding assets, down payment, right? There are different types of assets that are all given a certain percentage of worth. I've covered this in the past. I'm not going to get too deep into it, but a quick review of what I've already said in a past episode. Anything liquid is given 100% of its face value. Stocks, bonds, mutual funds, anything that you must sell or liquidate on the open market is given 70% of its face value. So, for example, John Fisher has $1 billion of Gap stock that is just sitting there that has not been liquidated. The bank would regard that as 700 million. Each lender has their own requirement regarding reserves, which is the amount of money you must have outside the principal down payment and anything and any type of cost associated with the project, which can be a hefty requirement. The process is so darn detailed. The amount of documentation that had to be provided to Goldman Sachs and US Bank would be comparable to stacked boxes in your garage when you have just moved or are preparing to move, to give you some sort of idea of what I'm talking about. The idea and thought that a bank would just print out a commitment letter like it's nothing, as it has been presented in the videos and reports I have seen, is absolutely 100% insane. Well, why does the commitment letter have conditions associated with it? If it's such a done deal and they're so qualified, why would it have conditions? Why is there not an escrow account? All these questions I have heard in reported news stories, in videos, in podcasts, whatever it may be. And I'm going to address those up next. Today's episode is brought to you in part by FanDuel. When I personally look at a sports book, there are two things that are most important to me. Is it easy to deposit? And more importantly, is it easy to withdraw? FanDuel checks both boxes for me. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. I have been hearing a lot of news outlets, podcasters, and all doubters, of course, which, as you know, there are a lot of. And why isn't there an escrow account where Fisher has placed a good chunk of money as a sign of good faith? Again, much of the outlets reporting on this story are comparing it to a sale of a home. Let's first get into why is an escrow account created? When someone buys a home, it is created to protect the seller. When someone commits to buying a home, the seller takes their home off the market because they are now in a binding contract with the buyer, which is good for the seller. What is bad for the seller is if the buyer backs out, because everyone knows the home is already sold. There would be no more bidders, no more offers. Therefore, any potential offers are now lost. Any potential bidders are gone. The escrow account is created for this and penalizes the buyer that backs out. He is penalized a certain percentage for potential financial damages to the seller. Now, in the Vegas Stadium deal, who was the seller? Correct. Nobody. Do you just want to see the money in the account because it makes you feel better? Why does the public feel entitled to see this information? You have zero right nor obligation to see this information. Now, I'm sure you're going to come back and say, hey, well, you know, the taxpayers are paying for this. We should be able to see the information. And I'm going to come back and say, well, you elected a government and you voted on laws to allow them to represent you and do this for you. And if you want to talk about the system and the laws and the government, that's a whole new topic that I'm not going anywhere near. Here is another thing that just boggles my mind regarding the skeptics and all the negative naysayers with regard to this and who want to see nothing but failure. And don't get me wrong, it's okay to be a skeptic. If you don't believe Vegas is going to happen, I respect that. I have no problem with that. That's a valid opinion. And it may not happen. You may be 100% right. I believe it will. But who knows? Maybe you're right. But if you are saying one of your reasons is because money is not in an escrow account, that's where it gets a little ridiculous for me. Let me ask you a question. What does your money earn being in an escrow account? I'll give you a second. What does your money earn being in an escrow account? Exactly. Zero. So if you are not required to put money in an escrow account, would you? Exactly. Thank you. Okay, so let's get to the commitment letters from the lenders, US Bank and Goldman Sachs. They have conditions on it. Why are there conditions on it? If this is going to happen for sure, there shouldn't be conditions. I tell you, it's amazing what I read and what I watch. There will always be conditions until the day the lender disperses the money. I mean, literally, the funder will receive the last condition and press the button to wire the money. I've personally seen it happen just like that. There are so many things that can happen that change a transaction. The stock market can crash. The cost of goods can rise to enormous type of heights. Interest rates. What happened in 2020? So many things can happen. Like I said, this deal may go south. But right now, with all current indications, and unless something monumental happens, like 2020, the A's are going to Vegas and a stadium will be built. I wouldn't be surprised if the financing continues to get delayed. Feds meet next week. They're talking about cutting rates. They're talking about cutting rates next month and the month after that. We don't know, but it's definitely something that is probable to happen. And usually from a Fed announcement of cutting rates to where the consumer actually sees that rate cut in long-term rates is about a month, maybe a 2-month lag. He's borrowing $300 million. Fisher will wait. He doesn't need to satisfy the public's need. He doesn't care. I think I heard another news outlet, or could have been just a podcast, where someone wanted to see the math on how they got approved because the commitment letter didn't mean anything. Let me tell you something. You couldn't understand the math, nor the work that went into it in order to come up with the final calculation. At the end of the day, I don't have a dog in this fight. The A's are not coming back to Oakland. That is a fact. As I have said in a past episode, I don't care if Vegas happens or does not. They will not be in Oakland. But I will speak the truth, and I will speak with reason to all you skeptics out there and just want to hate and yell and see failure and destruction. Who are you? Seriously, who are you? And who do you really think you are? Thank you for making Locked On A's your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB. Baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout the offseason. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. I will see you tomorrow.